We are recording.
We are recording. So, you mean for prosperity's sake, who we're interviewing?
This is Trent Creedon. He's the head principal here at Winfield High School.
Good afternoon.
All right.
Yeah, we'll start with the first question here. So, what does our interview process look like when it comes to hiring new teachers?
Okay, so how it works, we advertise the openings on the state educational website, KSDE website, and from there we start collecting applications. Usually it's about a 2-week window to allow candidates to get all of their information sent in to the district. It's collected, and then we start going through the applications, reading resumes, reference letters, qualifications, and typically we pick 3 to 4 candidates to interview. Once we have those candidates selected, either myself or one of the assistants makes contact with that individual, and we set up a date and time where we'll have them come in and interview. I've provided for you the interview questions that we use. It's kind of a program where we're allowed to select from 3 different questions from each category. What I try to do is select the same ones, the same questions, so that every candidate is getting the same question, and we can kind of compare answers, so that we're not, trying to compare apples to apples, basically, in that process. So we go through the interview process. The interview people usually are myself and assistant principals. Sometimes the associate or assistant superintendent is here, and then that's typically, if it's a opening where there might be a combined position between middle school and high school, we'll have a middle school administrator sit in on that interview. After all the questions are asked, you'll notice the very last question on there is, what questions do you have for us? And so we allow the candidate to ask any questions that they might have. I generally try to have our salary package and our insurance package copied off for them, so they have a copy of that they can take with them. If we have class schedules ready to go at that particular time whenever we're interviewing, I try to give them a list of the classes that they might be teaching, so they know what courses they would have. And then after that's done, if we have any questions, we answer those, and then I typically give the candidate a tour of the building, show them their classroom, where the prospective classroom could be. Try to walk them around the building and show them all the great features that we have to our building and the different things that we offer. And a lot of times that will spur some questions and some good conversation as we're touring the building, and you got to get a chance to meet and talk to the individual as you're walking them around, showing them the building. So that's typically how we do it here.
Is there a few questions? I'll get to that response. How do you create a welcoming environment for the candidate when they come here? To make them feel like it's welcoming, it's a place they want to be, where they want to be.
Well, when they come in, I always tell our office staff that we're expecting an interview candidate to come in, and I have one of the gals offer them either a bottle of water or coffee, and make sure that they ask them if they need to go to the restroom, that they're directed on how to get to the restroom. And we just try to be ourselves and be friendly. Try to make them feel like they're wanted and they're important. But that's typically how we do that. We try as best as we can to have the interview take place at the time that it's set. Sometimes we get delayed. It's kind of hard to get all of those different people in one place at one time. So sometimes there's some delays, but we try to get going as best we can at the time that we've set for the interview.
So you'd answered a couple of these that we have already, so I'm gonna skip down to the other one that says, when do you usually give a response to a candidate? So after the interview process and you've narrowed it down to the one that you like, how quickly does that response usually come?
Sometimes it depends on the position. If it's a really hard to fill position, for example, maybe a math or a science position, and we don't have a lot of top quality candidates, if we see someone or we're really interested in one of them, we might tell that candidate after the tour, could you just have a seat for a few minutes? We want to talk as a team. And it's happened before where we've offered that person a position right there before they leave. Other times, it's typically we've got a couple more interviews that we've got to conduct, and we will be back in touch with you in 2 days. And we try to let them know after the rest of those interviews are conducted if they're still a candidate in consideration, or if they're someone who's we're gonna pass on them and maybe go another direction. So a lot of it depends on the situation, what the position is, if they're the first candidate to be interviewed or the last candidate to be interviewed.
That time can change.
If you're interviewing a candidate on Friday and they're the very first candidate, it may be a week before you get everybody else in that you want to talk to, and then start calling everybody to let them know if they're still in consideration or if they're not in consideration. So a lot of it just depends on the situation and the time frame that you're up against.
Let's see. What does your ideal interview look like? Like, what's a perfect interview for you? Like, just like out of the park type of interview.
So what the candidate would do?
Yes.
Well, I think from my perspective, I think it would be someone who would come in and who has taken the time to research our district a little bit. They know a little bit about our strategic plan. They've probably been on our high school website and they know a little bit about what we do. Maybe they already know that we're on block schedule. They already know that maybe they know what our graduation rate is. They've done a little research on Winfield High School and maybe even the community as far as what the community is like, those kinds of things. They're dressed appropriately. And then I think from my perspective, I always enjoy someone who is easy to talk to, who's friendly. I want to make a judgment based on whether or not I feel that person is going to be able to relate to and talk to our students. If they're really standoffish, I'm looking for a good sense of humor. But I'm the thing in the back of my mind is always, would this person be a good fit for our kids? Would they be able to communicate, relate to the students that we have in our building? So those are the things that I'm looking for, personality-wise. Answering questions, how do they seem to be organized? Do they seem to be able to process information that we're telling them about our school as far as the curriculum, the different interventions and initiatives that we have going? What's their ability to use technology? Do they have experience in technology? Does it appear that they might be able to learn how to use technology and incorporate that into their classroom? So those are things that I'm looking for. Those would be qualities that I would be looking for in a candidate. And then I guess another one would be, would this candidate, does it seem like, or does it feel like they would fit in with our current staff? Would they be able to be a team player? If they're gonna be a math teacher, would they be able to work within the confines of our current team members, or social studies, English, whatever it might be?
So next question would be, what struggles have you had in finding and hiring teachers?
Really just the last couple of years, it's gotten much more difficult. The candidate pool is just not as high as it used to be. Let's see, 2 years ago we hired a social studies teacher, like 2 days before school started. Last year we hired a math teacher 1 day before school started. So it's becoming more difficult, and obviously the later that someone resigns in the process, it makes it even more difficult to try to get everybody in place. But I just think that there aren't as many college graduates going into the field. We talked about career fairs. I used to go to some career fairs, and I mean, you could just sit at your table and there would be students waiting in line to come talk to you. And the last couple of years that I've gone, we've actually had to go out and walk around in the areas and try to convince students to come and talk to us. So the candidate pool is shrinking, I think.
That kind of goes with, what can we do to help find and retain the best teachers? So that kind of goes with, like, what are some options that we have to kind of, help find those, qualified teachers, since the pool is shrinking?
Mm-hmm.
Any suggestion would be great.
Well, if I knew the answer to that.
I had a feeling that's probably where that one was going to go.
I mean, when we go to these recruitment fairs, we take all kinds of trinkets and Viking mugs and cups and pins, and a lot of it just comes down to money and benefit packages, what you can offer, and then where a student maybe many times they want to get closer to home. They don't want to be far away from family.
Mm-hmm.
We've had several candidates like that we've had here, and they've left because they wanted to be closer to family and friends. So I don't know. That's a good question. It's kind of hard when you're at a teacher fair and you're sitting at a table right here, and just right across from you is a district like Wichita, for example, who's offering contracts right there on the spot. And I don't know what their benefit package is, but if you're competing with schools who have higher salaries or different benefit packages, some students are drawn to those kind of districts. So yeah, I think a lot of it just depends on what the candidates are looking for.
Mm-hmm. So has there ever been a situation where a candidate that you'd hired had a great interview but struggled once they were hired? And if so, what did you guys have to do at the administration level?
So, I mean, I think that happens probably all the time, from time to time. Anybody can put on a dog and pony show for a period of time.
Yeah.
Really, the only recourse that you have as administration would be to make sure that you're going into those classrooms and observing, doing walkthroughs, and if that staff member is not working out, if they're not what they seem to be or appeared to be, then before they were able to gain access to the due process laws, then they would have to be, if you want to use the term, non-renewed. You would want to try to encourage them to move to a different position.
What are your thoughts on having teachers involved with the interview process?
I think I was talking to you prior to the interview here, and that's the way we used to do it several years ago. And then I don't know, probably 4 or 5 years ago, we were told that that process was no longer going to be used, and it was going to be all an administrative process. I felt like when teachers were involved, I felt like I felt like it was a way to share the interview process. I felt like it was a good process. I'm not sure why that changed. I'm sure there was a reason, but I've never been officially told why we don't do that anymore. But there's probably some good and bad. I think, and like the article said, I think it would be a way to help build teacher leaders and allow them in on the process. Obviously, the interviewer or the interviewee would get a chance to meet more people. If they were applying for an English position and we had several English teachers in that interview process, they would feel like they already had a basic knowledge of some of the people that they would be working with when they came to the building. I think one of the issues that could happen is if you did have teachers on your interview panel and the candidate was hired and it didn't work out, some of those teachers may not be willing to try to part ways with that person because they felt like they had a direct part in bringing him there. So I suppose there's positive and negatives with both of those philosophies. But personally, I think it would be